kinakailangan natin ay bagong politika. Politika ng masa. Politika ng mamayan.
I can get things done. Kaya ko po yung trabaho at may resulta at may prueba.
Towards the end of my term as president, there should be no doubt in the mind of every Filipino that we are better off than when we started.
Kung paano ako nangarap para maiahon sa kahirapan ang aking pamilya, ganun din po ang aking pangarap na maiahon sa kahirapan ang buong sambayan ng Pilipino.
True leadership is stepping up and showing up. Handang-handa akong harapin ang hamon ng pagiging Pangulo. At ngayong 2022, the last man standing will still be a woman.
You heard statements from 5 of the top aspirants vying for the highest post in the land. De Guzman, Moreno, Lacson, Pacquiao, and Robredo bravely faced members of the media as they were grilled on various issues and their plans for the Philippines.
Apart from grabbing the opportunity to lay down their platforms, the 5 also made a vow to serve the Filipino people with integrity. And as previously announced, top presidential aspirant based on surveys, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. was a no-show. The former senator, as it turns out, scheduled a separate interview with journalist Korina Sanchez. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. For the first time since the filing of their candidacies, 5 presidential aspirants finally came together virtually in a forum of the kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Calyodi de Guzman, Mayor Isko Moreno, Senator Ping Lacson, Senator Manny Pacquiao, and Vice President Leni Robredo faced a panel of journalists from all parts of the country to give us a picture of their vision for the country for the next 6 years. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to the big story.
It was the first presidential forum of the 2022 elections with 5 of the top candidates facing off for the first time. The Panata sa Bayan Presidential Forum, organized by the kapisanan ng mga broadcasters ng Pilipinas, drew out questions on corruption once more.
Senator Pacquiao, matagal na po ang hatol ng Korte Suprema. Ang mag-asawa pong Ferdinand Marcos at Imelda Marcos ay hindi lang magnanakaw kundi mandarambong. Ano po ang maaari niyong gawin na mabawi ang nakaw na yaman ng mga Marcos?
Palakasin po natin yung PCJJ at kailangan ang para sa gobyerno.
Senator Ping Lacson reiterated his promise to stamp out corruption in government.
Sa loob ng unang 100 araw, sisimulan ko ang internal cleansing laban sa mga inept, corrupt, at undisciplined government officials.
He was also confronted about an old issue when he went into hiding for more than a year, following the Dasser Corbito murder case in 2010.
Sinasabi sa jurisprudence, maski hindi ka magpasailalim sa legal sa physical custody, pwede pa rin umandar diyan, wala akong binayolate.
Meanwhile, Labor leader Calyodi de Guzman pushed for his 20% wealth tax on the 500 richest families in the country.
Pero kung hindi papasa ng Congress, ang gagawin natin, gagamitin natin yung People's Initiative na pamamaraan para maaprubahan yung batas na yan.
Vice President Leni Robredo was hounded by a bad internet connection. She later apologized, saying she had only borrowed the office at NAIA since she was flying out afterwards. One of the toughest questions to her was over whether her proposal to keep investigating the pork barrel scam will include her allies.
Kasama, hindi kasama, kalaban, kakampi, wala tayong kikilingan. Kasi oras na may kinilingan tayo, magiging failure na lahat.
Among Manila City Mayor Isko Moreno and Senator Manny Pacquiao's top priorities were increasing the budget for housing and education.
We will build 17 world-class regional hospitals.
Talagang libre hanggang pong makatapos kahit anong kurso.
Meanwhile, former Senator Bongbong Marcos skipped the forum, citing a conflict in schedule. He was later found to have sat down in an interview with Korina Sanchez, which his team scheduled. At the end of it, the candidates signed an oath to keep the elections fair and clean. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
How did the candidates fare and who came out with a clear vision for the country? That big question and more with Professor Edmund Tayo, Political Science Professor at the Ateneo de Manila University. Professor Tayo, welcome to The Big Story.
Hello, Robbie. Good evening.
So, Prof, your takeaway from the KBP Presidential Forum?
Well, first off, I'm glad that it's a forum instead of just a one-on-one interview. You know, the focus is more on the candidates. As I've always commented on the previous interviews, I was wondering why it became more of interviews instead of debates, as we've seen in previous presidential elections. That would have at least, focused the attention of the public to the candidates. But the forum, of course, is a welcome addition to the series of interviews that we've had earlier on.
Yeah, now, let's talk about what they actually said. Did they actually say anything that differentiated any or one or many of the candidates from others?
That's an interesting question, Roby. No? In fact, we should actually always ask that, particularly when it comes to economic policies. And you guys ask the economic policies of our candidates, and I'm inclined to think that there's not much difference. Most of them, if not all, actually are neoliberal approaches to the economy. There were attempts to present specific plans or specific program of action as far as key issues as education, health, particularly with respect to addressing the continuing problem of the pandemic, and corruption. No? But, at the end of the day, it's always a question of how they think more lasting or far-reaching reforms can in fact be undertaken. So the answer to that really is there's not much of a difference, other than, of course, the priorities, no, or the approach that each of the candidate might have thought to be the right way to start, no, the ball rolling.
Can Ferdinand Marcos Jr. continue to not attend the presidential forums and presidential debates as we move forward?
Well, I hope that the next events would allow us to see more of the former senator, so that we can actually hear from him some of his thoughts on critical issues. Particularly in the case of corruption, for example, tama yung sinabi mo, no, when you were asking the question in the forum, it's an age-old problem. In fact, I think even before I was born, corruption has already been an issue as far as our government and politics is concerned. But it seems everyone would always say he or she is against corruption, but as to how exactly that can be curbed is something else entirely. In other words, again, it's always a question of what concrete measures they might consider to be crucial, no, or critical in order to actually stamp out corruption.
Okay, maraming salamat po, Professor Edmund Tayaw. With all this talk of politics, we remind everyone that the official campaign period has technically not yet begun, but it does kick off officially next week. According to COMELEC rules, starting February 8, candidates are no longer allowed to campaign without the permission of the COMELEC Campaign Committee for each locality. Candidates are also banned from giving money as a form of ayuda or holding raffles. Vice President Leni Robredo, meanwhile, has requested an exemption for the Office of the Vice President's Angat Buhay program. COMELEC spokesperson James Jimenez says the COMELEC Bank has yet to decide on the VP's request.
This has already been heard and submitted for resolution to the Commission. So we are going to wait for that resolution. Hindi pa siya available. But basically saying no resolution yet.
These are the other big stories tonight. Conflict in schedule indeed. Turns out Ferdinand Marcos Jr. had another interview, which his camp himself scheduled at the same time and day as the KBP Forum. After multiple delays, a record number of more than 11,000 aspiring lawyers took the bar exam today. And actor Diether Ocampo was rushed to the hospital after his SUV crashed into a dump truck. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. True enough, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. had something else scheduled today, hence his absence in the Panata Sabayan Forum.
Marcos Jr. had a special interview with broadcaster Korina Sanchez, but as the TV personality clarified, it was Marcos camp who set the schedule. Diether Ocampo with the story.
On Friday, the hashtag #MarcosDuwagTalaga trended all over social media. This was after presidential aspirant Ferdinand Marcos Jr. decided to skip Panata Sabayan, the Presidential Forum. The kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas said it had invited Marcos weeks before the forum. However, his camp had already declined due to a conflict in schedule.
May mga naunang schedules talaga, and as everybody knows, we have shut down our operations for 2 weeks. And have just started entertaining guests and supporters middle of last week.
Rodriguez clarified Marcos Jr. had been attending different fora and interviews. On the day of the Kbp Forum, Marcos apparently had a one-on-one interview with broadcaster Korina Sanchez. The said interview will be aired on Saturday at 5 p.m. on TV5. But the rated Korina program clarified it was Marcos Jr.'s team which chose the time and date for the interview. Question now is, will we ever see Marcos in a presidential forum or debate? His camp remains on the fence.
Tingnan natin, if the program is for 1 hour, say for example, and there are 5 invited guests, tig-ilang minuto sila. And in our own assessment, mas appreciated ng sambayan ng Pilipino na interviewin isa-isa yung mga kumakandidato at bigyan ng sapat na oras magpaliwanag ng kanilang mga opinion o yung kanilang pananaw sa mga bagay na kasalukuyang problema ng ating bansa at bumabagabag sa ating bansa.
For News 5, Diether Ocampo, we are One News.
On the disqualification petition against Ferdinand Marcos Jr., COMELEC says Commissioner Marlon Casquejo can still decide on the case before he is transferred to a different division. With 3 seats in the COMELEC en banc now vacant, the commissioners will need to be reshuffled. But COMELEC spokesperson James Jimenez says there is still time as no official announcement has been made.
Since wala pa namang official na nalilipat, if he wants to come out with a decision today, then he can do that. But again, we're all waiting on the ponencia, the main decision.
And now for some happier news, an Angkas rider who worked hard to finish his studies while working as a rider is paying it forward by giving free rides. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza with his story.
It's not every day that we get something for free. But over at UP Techni Hub, a motorcycle ride won't cost a peso thanks to Angkas rider Mark Anthony. Even if passengers offer to pay, Mark respectfully declines. Why give free rides? Well, Mark is paying it forward. He just passed the 2021 criminology licensure exam.
Ang gusto ko lang po makapagbigay ng serbisyo sa ibang tao.
Before graduating, Mark works as a rider for Angkas at night and works on his studies during the day.
Pagdating po ng umaga, nagbabasa po ako ng mga files ko po, mga reviewer. Tapos pagdating po ng gabi, bumabiyahe po ako. Kaya po ako bumabiyahe ng gabi po para kumita ng pera. Saka syempre po para ma-relax po ng konti yung utak.
The viral social media post shared by a fellow Angkas rider has since garnered a lot of positive reactions from netizens. And as for Mark, sharing becomes a joy with all the blessings that has come his way. Mobile journalist Julie Baiza, we are One News.
Just before we hit the weekend, unexpected news. Actor Diether Ocampo got injured as his SUV crashed into a dump truck along Osmeña Highway in Makati. According to reports, the actor's car speedily hit the stationary truck, which was collecting trash at the time of the incident. Authorities say Ocampo was unconscious with only a cut in the forehead. He also smelled of alcohol. Ocampo was rushed and treated at the Makati Medical Center. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Time for another quick break. When we return, it's finally happening. A record 11,000 bar takers flocked to the first day of the exam for lawyers. From online sabong to extending build, let's find out what's on the economic agenda of the top presidential aspirants. And let's take a peek at the opening ceremony of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics and the lone Pinoy athlete proudly waving our flag. That and more after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. After more than 2 years of waiting, 2 batches of examinees finally got to take their bar exam today.
Understandably, a record number of takers took the test in the first ever pandemic bar exam. How exactly did the crisis change how the tests were conducted? Find out in Marlene Alcaide's report.
As early as 4 in the morning on Friday, bar examinees already lined up at the University of Santo Tomas and Far Eastern University. Takers waited for 2 years to finally take the bar after the pandemic delayed examinations.
Kinakabahan na excited po kasi parang matagal na po namin hinintay po ito.
Naragan po. Medyo stressful yung preparation pero etong huli na, sige na lang.
This is the biggest bar examination on record in terms of attendance with 11,378 takers. The Supreme Court had to combine batches 2020 and 2021 after the bar was postponed thrice.
It is the batch that will fulfill the lack of new lawyers that happened within the last 2 years because of the pandemic.
But some still failed to take the test after getting infected with COVID-19. Being the first pandemic bar exam, there were a few changes. There were no traditional send-offs, and examinees have to bring a laptop as tests are now digital.
The software that we have procured will stop all existing apps, including the operating system. And therefore, as soon as they enter the password, for the examination, no app will be allowed by their computer.
If exams used to be held on all Sundays of November, this time it's been limited to February 4 and 6. 31 testing sites nationwide were also put up. With a testing area for the vaccinated and unvaccinated, an isolation area is also ready for those who developed symptoms. A command center was also put up to monitor examinees who are required to show a negative test result. As for those who tested positive,
baka pwede namin ibalik yung application fee. Certainly, hindi ho pwede na may special exam.
Day 2 and the last day of the bar exam will be on Sunday, February 6. For News 5, Marlene Alcaide, we are One News.
As they are set to inherit mounting debt, how exactly do the presidential aspirants plan to steer the economy? A look at their agenda in mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez's report.
The 5 presidential candidates who showed up to the Kbp's Banata Sabayan Presidential Forum had few differences when it came to economic policies. One of them was over the issue of online sabong. Only Manila City Mayor Isko Moreno and Senator Manny Pacquiao were in favor of it.
All these things must be regulated. I would rather put them under the authority and supervision of the state.
Siguraduhin ng ating gobyerno na makukulikta yung buhis. Kailangan lang po natin i-regulate.
Labor leader Leody de Guzman and Vice President Leni Robredo were outright not in favor, citing sabong's negative impact on the community, especially youth. While Senator Ping Lacson said he wants to study the issue first. Regarding land reclamations, de Guzman and Moreno were on opposite ends.
Kasi ang nakikinabang lang sa mga reclamation yan ay mga lalaking kapitalista.
Kung talagang naghahanap tayo ng pambayad ng utang, kita at trabaho, kailangan natin itong i-push through.
The other three were on the fence, saying every project will need to be assessed on its environmental impact. As to whether or not to create the Boracay Island Development Authority or BIDA, only Lacson and de Guzman expressed support. The bill will create a new government body to run Boracay and has already passed Congress. Vice President Robredo took a hard line against it.
Hindi po pipirmahan na namawala ng boses yung stakeholders, yung local government units. Hindi pwedeng alisin yung boses ng mga maapektuhan.
All presidential aspirants also said they will continue the Build project. Moreno and Lacson took it one step further and said they want to bring back public-private partnerships to help fund key infrastructure.
Kung perfected na yung kontrata, hindi pwedeng hindi patupad. Pero dapat mag-shift na tayo papunta sa PPP, Public-Private Partnership.
All the candidates also talked about the importance of prioritizing healthcare and job creation, though left specific details out. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, We Are One News.
In world news, Islamic State leader Abu Ibrahim al-Quraqishi detonated a bomb and killed himself during a U.S. Special Forces raid in Syria. The helicopter-borne assault and the eventual suicide of al-Quraishi killed at least 13 civilians, including women and children living in the apartment. U.S. President Joe Biden says the operation showed that American forces could take out terrorist threats anywhere in the world. The slain leader is said to be the driving force behind the ISIL campaign of massacres and sexual violence against the Yazidis in northwestern Iraq.
For the big story in sports, we give you a glimpse of the opening ceremonies of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. Athletes from 91 countries, including the Philippines, will be marching during the Parade of Nations. And as with every major international sports competition over the past 2 years, the program was simplified to adhere to COVID-19 protocols. Meanwhile, Phil-Am skier Asa Miller is set to carry the country's colors in the opening ceremonies for the second time in a row. Joining the 21-year-old are Philippine Olympic Committee President Bambol Tolentino, Philippine Ski and Snowboard Federation head Jim Palomar, and Chef de Mission Bones Floro. Miller will compete in the men's giant slalom on February 13 and the slalom event 3 days later. The young alpine skier said he is tempering his expectations for himself, but vowed to go all out and give his best performance.
I'm very confident in my abilities and where my skiing is at the moment. And so I'm just hoping I can bring out the best of it on those competition days. I'm very proud, and I can't wait to show off and represent the Philippines.
After watching the Kbp Presidential Forum, hopefully each of us has a better idea as to whom we would want to support.
But just because we support different candidates doesn't mean we can't get along. This quote-unquote solid BBM Tito was caught by surprise and could not stop laughing when he started unwrapping his birthday gift from nephew Dave Robles. In a TikTok video, Dave showed his Tito Luis bringing out one by one various pink campaign materials.
First, a Lenny Kiko tarpaulin, then a Kakampink cap, t-shirt, finally Robredo stickers. But instead of irking him, Tito Luis had a good laugh from the experience. People online praised Tito Luis for being such a good sport, and the family, the entire family, for being able to put their differences aside.
Well, with the hot political climate, it's good to remind ourselves that isa lang ang pinaglalaban natin, ang future ng ating bansa. Naka-recover ka na ba pagkatapos kanina?
Oh, no, of course. We appreciated everybody who showed up. It's unfortunate that not everybody was there, but I think the big takeaway here is that even 3 hours is not enough. Matagal pa po ito. Hanggang May pa tayo mahaba-habang usapan pa.
Alam mo kung anong takeaway ko? Never ako magpapa-interview sa'yo.
Sige. Wag na. Kay Ed Lingaw ka na lang magpa-interview.
Hindi rin. Well, gusto ko lang pala sabihin bago tayo pumunta sa weekend. Abangan nyo po, Frontline sa umaga this coming Monday. I'll be there 10:50 to 11:30 in the morning. Gumising po tayo ng maaga. Hindi man sobrang aga, sakto lang. And also, please head on over to One Sports right now. The Beijing Winter Olympics, it's opening and supportahan natin si Asa Miller. Congratulations, partner. Instead of the weekend, mahaba pa ang laban. That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again on Monday, 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.